which means you need a sportsbook with integrity and longevity like BetUS. BetUS have been pioneers in the sportsbook industry for almost 3 decades, thriving and paying their loyal customer base. And they have loads of bonuses. Join now at betus.com today and receive a 125% sign-up bonus by using bonus code Chicago125. BetUS is known as America's favorite sportsbook for a lot of reasons. BetUS has all your NFL games with team and player props and loads of NFL futures and odds. In addition to the NFL, you can bet on college football games, PGA golf, UFC matches, and more. They have every bet type imaginable, and the BetUS mobile platform is easy to use with full betting options. Follow my lead and get your phone, online, and social sports betting partner with integrity and longevity like I did. Cash in on your 125% sign-up bonus at betus.com with our code Chicago125. BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. BetUS. What's going on, you guys? Welcome to this post-game show, 26-6 loss, Bears to the Browns. I'm your host, Nicholas Moriano. I'm accompanied by my co-host here, Mason West. And Mason, before we go into our, structured show, what we kind of have here, what are your thoughts, man? Like this, obviously, before we went live, it's like, yeah, we came to expect this, but what are just your opening thoughts of this Bears-Browns game?
I don't know why I expected anything different. we talked about that a little bit, like you said, before the show officially kicked off here. It's the same old stuff, right? And we just see it over and over again. And the question, who's at fault? Was it Mitch Trubisky was the problem? Is it, this offensive coordinator? Oh, we got to get rid of him because we're not running it well enough. Oh, no, it was our offensive line coach. And you go back to last year where Nagy fired himself as the offensive coordinator, and then apparently you can hire yourself back the next year, and it's just, again, it's just redundant at this point. And definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Exactly, and Mason, we'll obviously get into it, but just a lot of the similar thoughts from me as I was kind of watching it, and I had friends over, had my girlfriend over, my dad was in and out watching it. It's like when they're starting the lead is starting to dissipate, as the game kind of goes on, and the Bears are not going to win this one. It's like, yeah, we've been here before. We've seen the offense do absolutely nothing, and this almost took it to like another level of just no productivity on that side of the ball. But like I said, we'll get into it, and we'll kind of jump into now what we usually do in our structured kind of post-game show format. I'll start with the first quarter of our show. And with that, I'll start with just my opening statement. And that what I want to kind of start this with is with Matt Nagy and the game plan. What exactly was it? What did Matt Nagy and this offense want to try to accomplish in this one? Because there were no tendencies except for maybe short yardage passes, keeping Justin Fields inside the pocket, not playing to his strengths, all those negatives. But what were you trying to do? Did you not account for the pass rush being good in this game, despite them having a Myles Garrett who went off, Mason, went crazy out there? It's like, did you not account, like, what if they get their pass rush going this game? What am I going to do to combat that? It seemed like Matt Nagy and what their offensive just game plan was for this one, they almost didn't account for that to happen. They're like, oh, the Browns didn't have a pass rush before this game. They're not going to get against us with our offensive line. So those are just kind of the thoughts I was thinking about. Like, what did Matt Nagy want to do? He didn't target anybody specifically on the defense to try to exploit any matchups. And not that there was really much time to do so, but just in like thinking inside, like what were you trying to do, Matt Nagy and Bill Lazor and John DeFilippo? What was it that you were trying to do? We will never get the answer to that question, Mason, because I don't know if there is an answer. But I'll end it at that because I'll probably just go ramble on, and who knows? We'll go into a deep, deep, dark hole that I don't want to get into. But Mason, I'll hand it over to you. What's kind of your standout stat of this game?
I was torn between two. The really obvious one, I think, is like you were talking about the pass rush, right? 9 sacks, 4.5 by Myles Garrett. That 4.5 by Myles Garrett, right? That's insane. You just can't let that happen. I'm just blown away. That's the most, and those 9 sacks are the most since October 3rd, 2010, which was in that Giants game. How do you, we talked about this in the last episode where we were saying, okay, I'm not super scared of the pass rush. They haven't hit home yet. Hopefully this doesn't continue. But we threw that caveat out there. At some point, they're going to start getting home. They're too skilled. Miles Garrett, Davian Conley, Takras McKinley is all a part of that too. Eventually, it's going to start. And apparently, they just needed a Matt Nagy offense and an offensive line that can't move. And Greg Olson said this at the end of the broadcast where Clowney was saying, man, I've never been chipped so much in my whole career. And we didn't see that at all, really. I felt like it was a lot of, all right, Jason Peters, have fun over there. All right, Ifedi, you have fun over there. Just do the best you can. And, a lot of Ole blocking, to say the least.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. It was just an interesting, like some of what the tackles were looking at in certain plays. Like I know I tweeted out on the final Miles Garrett sack of the day. It's like, how many were there? There's a bunch, right? So it's like the final one. It's like Jason Pierce is looking inside, and again, we don't know the protection, how that's kind of called up, what his responsibilities are on that one. But like knowing Miles Garrett is to your left, and your first reaction, maybe that's scheme what he's supposed to do, but it just seems outlandish and crazy that it's not to look that way to the guy who's been wrecking your entire game plan, your entire offense that game. Mason, I was for Will's monster moment, I was kind of like lost at what that could potentially be, because I don't know if there was one real big play that really, took this game out of hand. I think it was just over the course, especially of that second half, because of the 10-3 game at halftime. But I'll defer to you because I really don't have anything. But is there anything, a monster moment? And obviously this could go negative or positive. There wasn't much positive for the Bears, maybe defensively early on. But is there a monster moment there for you?
There was that one where I felt personally the tide changed for me, or at least the momentum definitely shifted, where it was one of the sacks. There was a trillion of them. And I believe it was the one by Clowney that lost 10 yards. And that was what also led to them getting that touchdown drive later. To me, yes, it was the slow trickle effect, kind of that water torture, just drop, and all of a sudden it got worse and worse. But for a little while, I was like, okay, this is going fine. We can do. Oh no, never mind. And then when that sack happened, but like you said, it was just a culmination of ineptitude that really just that was through that entire game.
Yeah, you know what? I guess I maybe this again. Maybe doesn't qualify as what the segment's for this monster moment, but seeing Deion Bush miss a 3-yard, it would have been a 3-yard loss on Kareem Hunt in the backfield, missing that tackle there, and then Kareem Hunt going up that right sideline. Eddie Jackson, right, use the hit stick there, lowering the head, completely whiffing, and Kareem Hunt getting that touchdown. That makes it that makes it a 20-6 ball game early in the fourth quarter when, hey, realistically, that should have been, they were at the Chicago 29-yard line. You would have forced a field goal. It's within reach, but knowing how the Bears are playing on offense, it never felt that way. But that maybe would be one that I guess would qualify for that, and obviously yours as well. But yeah, just it just over the course of that second half, we really just started to see the two teams kind of separate, and the Bears offense not able to do anything. We'll get into that. But before we do, I have to tell you about our quick message from our sponsors at Manscaped. Attention listeners from across the galaxy, all the way from Australia to Houston. Do we have a pube problem? If so, our friends at Manscaped have cleared you for takeoff with their 4th generation and brand new Lawnmower 4.0. Kick your pubes to the next planet with the Performance Package 4.0. The orbits in your pants will feel like you're in zero gravity when you use the best tools for the job from the leaders in male grooming. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get your rocket ready for takeoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code FANSIDED20. This 4th generation trimmer also features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction on and off switch that can engage in travel lock, and is even waterproof. Inside this package, of course, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance Boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all those goodies together. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FANSIDE20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code FANSIDE20 at manscaped.com. For a clean, trendy, and beyond, your space balls will thank you. All right, you guys, we're heading into our second quarter of the show. And that's where we have to unfortunately talk about this Bears offense, Mason. So I kind of want to just open up the floor here. Just about anything on this Bears offense. And there's a lot to look at, but there's not a lot of production, obviously. But where do you kind of want to start this? What, after seeing what happened today against the Browns, again, on the road, going to be a playoff team in my eyes, but what maybe upsets you the most, or what is like maybe the reason why the Bears were not able to do anything? But again, what maybe upsets you?
It's a combination where understanding who Justin Fields is right now. He's a rookie quarterback starting in his first game, right? And we know that. And going back to some of his college tape, we know there's a chance that, does he hold the ball a little bit too long? What are his reads like? And just understanding that, you would imagine that your coaching staff would create a game plan to minimize those aspects. But the problem was they didn't do that whatsoever. It was the entire first half. They had one play that they actually moved the pocket that he had to roll out. And it was a completion when we saw that. That's insane to me. And it's just those issues, though, where it wasn't just with like Matt Nagy's playing calling. It was awful. And we know that we can get into that more. But then you also saw issues with Justin himself. There was one play in particular, snap, gets the ball, stares down to the left side. I believe it was the slant route to Allen Robinson. And it was like, all right, I know where that ball's going immediately. 3 seconds, 2-3 seconds go by, and that's where it goes. So that can't happen. There needs to be a look off, or if you're going to get that ball out, it needs to be quicker. That pass interference to Allen Robinson that occurred, he had Darnell Mooney open. That was a touchdown. He's got to get that ball out. And then you look at some of the routes were funky. There was one Cole Kmet had. I tweeted about it. It was bad play design, first of all. If I see more like all hitches, I'm going to go insane. But he ran the route to the stick, turned around, and then floated back towards the defender as the ball was coming to him. That route has to be past the sticks so that he can drive and attack the ball downhill, catch it, get the first down. Instead, he floated back to the defender so he was able to punch the ball out. There's things like that were just frustrating throughout the entirety of the game.
No, absolutely. I was seeing, again, all Bears fans are seeing a lot of the same things you were, Mason. It just didn't quite make sense why Matt Nagy was doing what he was doing. But what I think what really strikes me is that earlier in the week, just in his press conferences, again, maybe I'm taking too much of what Matt Nagy says in his press conference, and that's on me. But it did seem genuine when he said, we are looking at plays that cater to his strengths. Anything that he doesn't like, we're dishing him out of there. And we're going to use things that he likes to do. But after that first half, Mason, there's nothing that I saw out there that showed me what Justin Fields likes to do. Like, sit in the pocket, throw these hitches, don't even try to attempt the ball deep. Again, there wasn't time. I understand that. I completely understand that. But still, you mentioned the one play he rolls out. It's completion Allen Robinson, I believe, on the left sideline. The one play he rolls out in that first half. I don't see why there wasn't even an attempt to do that. Maybe it still doesn't work because that rush was really getting there, but the Bears didn't even make that seem like it was an option, given that you have Justin Fields as your quarterback. That's one of his strengths, to get outside the pocket, to extend plays with his legs. And if no one's open downfield, which receivers weren't consistently, you can run with that. But that wasn't in the game plan, Mason. It just wasn't, especially in the first half. There was a little bit more. If you're watching, it's like a tiny bit more of like calls where he's actually designed to roll out, but that's not enough. So that's something that just didn't make sense. And then look, there was I think there was maybe 5 or 6 3-and-outs in this game for the Bears offense, just kind of looking through the play-by-plays on ESPN, but like not even trying to, I guess, get Allen Robinson, somebody as involved in that one. Yes, I think, like I just mentioned, he caught the one on the side, and it just, like, when your offense is stalled as bad as it was for the Bears this game, like, that should be your security blanket, not the Cole Kmet play that you referenced Mason, because Cole Kmet hasn't shown us how you can do that yet. It's Allen Robinson has, so you just got to find ways to make that work. But and again, that's bigger picture. But again, maybe we should talk about this offensive line, Mason, because there's issues. if you didn't know that from watching this game, there are some issues. What just after watching the game again? This is all on the fly, but what was your assessment of how that group played today?
Not great is the easiest way to put it, right? I mean, and that's really obvious. And when you see where the pressures were coming from, the people that were really creating it wasn't up the middle. I mean, no, the interior wasn't fantastic either, but it was definitely the edges, right? So when you have Jason Peters and Jermaine Ifedi, like just whiffing consistently. You reference that one play where Peters didn't even look at Myles Garrett. It seemed like, and I'm not an offensive line expert or anything like that, but you would imagine that the tackle, especially when you don't have a running back on that side of the formation, probably has to deal with the defensive end on that side. We need to remember, though, I mean, the line played well last week, or well enough for them to get the win. And it's just such this roller coaster where we're like, all right, Jason Peters, look how high he scored, Jermaine Ifedi, they're one of the highest scoring offensive linemen of the week. So I feel like to come in now and just absolutely crush them isn't necessarily fair. And I still believe that goes back to the play calling. When you look at the fact that Dave Montgomery had 10 carries, 2 receptions, so only 12 touches, yeah, you're going to pin your ears back as a defensive line. It's going to be really difficult to do that when you don't leave a back end to help, when you don't have a tight end that's going to help Chip. And I think that's part of that is also roster construction. Where is the Jesse James help? You look at all these other teams and they have a fullback on the squad. They have a blocking tight end, someone that's really going to help with that. Do the Bears truly even have that? And the answer is arguably no. I wouldn't say that there's someone I'd feel confident being like, all right, you go help double team on Garrett just to give Field a little extra help. So, when you see, like we talked about, the adjustments, when you see that they're having this issues, because Jason Peters is 39 years old. Myles Garrett looks like, Black Thor out there. What do you expect him to do there? Help him out, because this is the team you have. You don't have someone. We don't have Tevin Jenkins. We don't know when he's going to come back, right? We don't have Larry Borum. We don't know when he's going to come back. And again, they're both rookies anyway. So right now, you need to help them out.
Absolutely. And just kind of going on with things that are wrong with this Bears offense, because we could probably just do the whole show on that, Mason. But I also noticed, my dad was just kind of again, in and out watching the game. He's like, is Jimmy Graham, does he still play for the team? I'm like, good question, Dad. Ironically, he actually came into the game because the Bears were somewhat close to that space on the field called the red zone, which they weren't very familiar with in this game. But, Jimmy Graham, they showed him on there. And that also goes into the personnel and how they're using them, things like that. So I just don't quite, why is Jimmy Graham on this team? Honest to God, what is his role? If it's a mentor, man, that would be such a great job to get, Mason. I mean, just the amount of money to be a mentor for Cole Kmet, who, let me look at the stat sheet here. Again, not trying to harp really badly on Cole Kmet, but 1 reception for 11 yards. And again, the whole offense was terrible, but this is not, there are things that are just not making sense. And that's just one of many. I kind of want to go back though, because it's all over the place, and that's fine. It's cool. On that first series, Mason, where the Bears, they take over at the 47-yard line. They get the big run by David Montgomery to start things off. You're like, oh, you're clapping your hands. You're like, this is going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. And that was about it. But then we have the 3rd and 2 play, and you have that sweep to the left, and it looks like Justin and Cole Kmet were talking. Play? Yes, Mason, what is that play? That's a great question, which Nagy definitely doesn't have an answer to. But it's like Justin Fields is talking to Kmet. Somebody blew something there, and then some of the wide receivers are expected to make blocks on the edges there, and it just, I don't know, man. It's like hindsight, maybe, right? The play didn't work. Obviously, it's not a good one, but it still just doesn't. It didn't feel right when they called it, and when you didn't see it executed, it didn't feel right.
Well, you're 100% right So even if you just look at pure execution, like you said, Cole Kmet definitely messed something up there. I have to go back and watch a little more closely. Plus, we don't know the full play design, but Justin going to talk to him afterwards. You also are sweeping to the side that of Jason Peters, who is not exactly fleet of foot at this point, and expecting him to be able to reach out that far. You're shortening your field. It's 3rd and 2. Like, why are you trying? You don't have the edge over there. Why not? You're not attacking up the middle, which is what Montgomery does best when he gets north and south. You don't even have an option. Like, let's say Justin read something. Like, if it was an inside handoff, he could pull it and roll. He could pull, and you could do an RPO there. There's so many other things that would have made way more sense in that situation than what they did there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we'll kind of do this like just from what stands out, Mason, because there really isn't anything to evaluate from this offense. To be completely honest, the team ended. Just checking the team stat, total plays, they ran 42 total plays. That's got to be it. 47 total yards. I mean, I knew it was bad, but you couldn't even get 50 yards for an entire game. I have to go back and watch Mitchell Trubisky in those games to see if it was ever that bad. I know. Wow, that is okay. I don't know why that's so mind blowing after watching this game, but it is. Another thing that kind of just again thinking of certain plays is that the few moments that Justin Fields did extend outside the pocket, it felt like receivers didn't adjust to him. Like, again, we were talking about last week how, I wrote a whole article on this, is like how his teammates failed to help him out. It also seemed like that was obviously bits and pieces in this, or a lot. Obviously the offensive line, but I think it was Greg Olson who was talking about it during the broadcast. It's like, when this kid rolls out, why are his guys not breaking off and trying to see where he's at and just kind of make things a little bit easier for him so he doesn't have to do everything by himself? And I know Darnell Mooney talked about that earlier in his press conferences this week. It's like, when he rolls out, we know that, again, the play is still alive, that we need to adjust to him. And again, there weren't a lot of opportunities for Bears receivers to do that because those plays were never really called in the first place, and those edges were hammering down on Justin Fields. And like you pointed, there were some that maybe Fields can do something else, and rightfully so, but there weren't a lot of opportunities. But you would like to even see it when the few opportunities are presented, they help out the young quarterback, or Matt Nagy helps him out by calling plays that actually work. Mason, I really don't even know where to take this offensive conversation, because this was almost just a new low, or just the norm. Because again, we've been through this before. We've been where the offense is unable to do anything. Is there anything that you kind of want to get to with this Bears offense? And really, it can go position, philosophy, Matt Nagy, feel anything. The floor is open, because there was really nothing to kind of look at today.
The one thing I want to build off something you said too, in terms of the receiver route running, when you have the summer like they had, right, and they're preparing for Andy Dalton, and we talked about this over and over and over again. How often did Fields actually get to play with this offensive line? Did they get to play with these receivers? I only got to go 2 days, but the 2 days I went to training camp, and then based off some of the things you've said and what the beat writers have said, I can't think there wasn't a time where they said, "Oh, look at that! That was a beautiful throw, deep pass to Allen Robinson in live action," right? Because that's not happening. There's not instances where we've seen in practices and training camp and all that Darnell Mooney's had to go from running his fly route to come back and across the field so that Justin can find him. So a lot of this is also just simply I think also a failure on the coaching staff to not get enough reps, and especially once you get into the actual season, the practices are so much different. It's much slower in pace. It's not live action. So I think what we'll see over time is that this will get better. It will get better. The receivers will be able to know what Justin likes more. The Justin will understand a little bit better in terms of some of his coverages. He'll get a little quicker with his reads. But the thing that does have to change is what we're calling on is the game plan. It is literally the plays. Tweeted this out earlier as well. When the Browns ran that one screen play to Hunt a little early in the game, and it was beautiful. They ran multiple screens this game actually with their running backs, and they got giant chunk plays out of it. Why? The running backs who are very dynamic were in the open field with blockers in front of them. Now, I don't know if they just simply don't think the offensive line can get out into the open field at this point, but when was the last time, I'm having a hard time remembering, when was the last time you saw a running back screen? When was the last time we saw a tight end screen, who in theory, Cole Kmet's your big athletic tight end you got in the second round? Things like that are extensions of your run game and get the ball out quick and also build confidence. I mean, how hard would it be to beat Justin Fields and when you have how many completions did he have total? There were six receptions today. Six. I wouldn't be confident doing that either. Like, that's insane. Set your players up for success.
Absolutely, Mason. Absolutely. Okay, this is from Kevin Fishbane tweeted it, who's obviously at the press conferences, but Matt Nagy, and this is going to be very obvious. Quote, I obviously, as a head coach, didn't do a good enough job getting the offense ready. Shocker!
I hate you.
No way.
Oh,
it's
my
like
God.
that. I feel like that's such a scapegoat kind of answer for him. That's just that's his go-to. Like, I just didn't do a good enough job today. Oh, I didn't do a good enough job this game, that game. It's like he's become so, again, accustomed to giving that answer. It's just like, that's not a get out of jail free card. It's like, your offense was terrible. You can't just say you didn't do a good enough job. I feel like there's never really much accountability for Nagy. Like, people, look, we get, like, there's a lot on Twitter that, it's Matt Nagy's fault, and rightfully so, but where's the accountability actually happening in the Bears organization? Oh.
This just in. Matt Nagy says Bears QB Justin Fields may have injured a hand late in the loss this afternoon.
I thought I saw Tristan, you're awesome, in the chat say that too. I just wanted to see. I couldn't find it initially. So this could not be this is the worst case scenario. It's like, you get blown out. There's nothing on offense you can really build on. There's nothing. And if Justin Fields is hurt, and if Andy Dalton can't play, good old Saint Nick Foles is gonna have to, like, I don't want to speculate too much, but hopefully the injury, however significant it is to Justin Fields' hand, is obviously not a major one, but I'm sure we'll have to go and find the play and see what you could do there, Mason, to see if you could see anything. But that's disappointing.
Couldn't be worse. Like you said, the hope is, I mean, clearly Justin finished the game. Hopefully it's, maybe like a non-throwing hand situation. If it's throwing hand, like thumb or something like that, that's pretty detrimental. That's awful. And oh man, if we have to play the Lions with St. Nick, I'm gonna lose it.
Oh man, yeah, that I think that was a game that all of us were planning on attending to be in person too. So we get to see Justin Fields play for the first time at Soldier Field, Mason, and will come back to Soldier Field and see Nick Foles, which would be sad and kind of funny. But Michael in the chat, Nick, you'll be our quarterback. I don't know if you're referring to Nick Foles, but it's definitely not gonna be me. All right, so I think that, really, honestly, Mason,
that's it. There's nothing else.
We'll wrap it up. We'll wrap up the offensive talk here, and let's talk about this Bears defense, because there's a lot more positives on that side. And yes, we can get to the negatives there, but again, it was 26-6, and that defense played a lot of football today. Mason, what are just some of your takeaways from that unit in today's loss against the Browns?
The defense played well enough to win. Like, you don't always have to force turnovers. It doesn't have to be what it was last week against the Bengals in order to create a successful outcome. Especially that first half, stellar. Robert Quinn is proving me wrong. I was on record saying I'm done with him, washed up, get him off the team, trade him for a bucket in a mop for all I care. He's been playing really, really well. And him and also Mack. Let's talk about Khalil Mack. He also, he had 2 sacks today? Yeah, 2 sacks, and Quinn with 1.5. And he also came back from that injured foot. We'll see what happens the rest of the week, of course, but the tenacity to be able to play through an injury like that. And having players come back, in terms of having Mario Edwards, that was huge. He put a ton of pressure. Akeem Hicks playing through that illness. Jalen Johnson did great against OBJ. OBJ is just a physical freak, and I don't care, obviously coming off an ACL probably would limit him a little bit, but still held him in check. They held the rushing attack back much better than I thought, but like you said, they were out there a lot. with all of those positives, it's very hard to keep a team off the scoreboard when you have to play that many snaps, especially when you have some of these injuries and things that are holding you back a little bit. So, I mean, not to go back to the offense too much, but if they actually were able to stay on the field a little more, have some scores out there, I think we could have seen even a better output from the defense.
I think so too. And kind of where I want to start this is how this defense played and what was such a big focal point. What I kind of mentioned in the preview shows, can this Bears defense win on first down? And early on, Mason, they were doing that. Where whether Baker Mayfield was designed to pass on, on the very first play of a series, or they handing off the ball to Chubb or Hunt, on first down, the Bears were winning that. And that really messes with what the Browns were trying to do offensively. And that's why it ended up being a 10-3 ball game at the half. And I thought what you saw from the front seven, and man, I kept writing down in my notes 58, 58, 58. Roquan Smith was everywhere. And look, that's just him building off an impressive performance that we saw a week ago and showing that, yeah, I can make the pick six. And now, obviously, I can go sideline to sideline, make those tackles, read what the offensive line's doing, and just make a tackle on these dynamic running backs, because that's what Roquan Smith is doing. But also, to your point, like seeing number 94, Robert Quinn, win these one-on-ones and getting back there. Look, I will gladly eat my words. I know you will too, Mason, if he's playing well, because we've been waiting for this. My dad's like, is 94 new? I'm like, no, we just had, 2 sacks all of last season. So it's great to see him, playing the way he is. And, even like a guy like Mario Edwards, first game action today and doing what he did. That's nice to see from that unit, because that's definitely a positive. You could take away that from this game. I know, look, the Browns ended up finishing with 9 sacks. The Bears had 5, which typically would be a good day for that unit. They just, had a far better day on the opposite side of the field there. Another thing that I kind of noticed there, which definitely is something that the Bears never did with Fangio, never with Vic Fangio, or just in the previous 2 games, they were kind of switching the corners a little bit. You saw Kindle Vildor and Jalen Johnson kind of swapping sides, and I couldn't get a read if it was Johnson following Odell. I don't know if that was necessarily the case.
I think it was. It seemed like he was pretty much shadowing OBJ unless he was in the slot.
Okay, so I think, look, that's something that's completely different from the Vic Fangio days, because Fuller stayed on one side, then he had Prince Mukamura and whoever else was, maybe fit into that role, stay on their sides. But that was something that I think Sean Desai mentioned something a little bit of that. Like, you'll have to wait and see. And you saw that happen a little bit, because I thought you saw early on too, the Browns, despite not having as much offensive success, they had a few plays that were kind of catered to attacking Kindle Vildor. I think there was a holding call where he was on OBJ. Then you had Donovan Peoples-Jones on the opposite side, where after Jalen Johnson and him had switched, he gave up a reception over there. So they were kind of targeting that weakness. I mean, I guess that would make a lot of sense. If you're looking at the Bears defense, probably that and nickel corner. So something a little different. And I don't know, after, just few game of it, Mason, are you in favor of the Bears kind of having Jalen Johnson shadow a number one? Or, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm so for it. I've been on record before saying, like, my issue with Kyle Fuller was how he played off and how they never flipped sides of the field. So when you had a situation where you have like a number 1 wide receiver, someone that you have to contain. So OBJ falls in that category, your DeAndre Hopkins of the world, things like that. Someone you're like, if we can shut this person down or at least limit them, we have a chance to win this game. They never were able to do that. Part of it was also they trusted both corners relatively equally. But at the end of the day, if you have someone like Jalen Johnson, who arguably has been one of the better cornerbacks in the entire league, let him follow the best receiver around. That's perfectly fine by me, and I think shows a lot of confidence in that player, especially when he has output like he did today. I thought Jalen Johnson played great today.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially, look, whether OBJ is coming off an AC, it's still Odell Beckham Jr. And he had one. It was just a fantastic route, honestly, where he just fakes like he's going up the field and just stops. I don't know how momentum can just stop like that, but that's why he gets paid millions of dollars, and that's why I talk about it. But he did, and he got one of those receptions on Jalen Johnson. Something that I also like, just because we need to talk about some positives in this podcast, Mason, because it's all been negative up to this point, and I'll get back to the negatives at some point. But another thing that I liked, what you saw kind of carry over from that win against the Bengals, is kind of how and where these pass rushers are kind of lining up. There was a couple plays actually against the Bengals where Mac was lined up as an inside linebacker and then comes free off a blitz. Notice that happened on one of the rushes early on. I think it was on either the Browns' second, I think it was their second or third offensive series, where I'm like, did Mac just come from the inside again? He did. And it's like those little wrinkles, putting guys in different spots and having them stunt and twist with other guys. I'm all in favor of that, because it seemed to, be working for what, they saw in this Browns offensive line, trying to create some confusion and just kind of putting these guys in position to make plays. And that's what, for the most part, a lot of these guys did. So that was something that I also liked. Anything else stand out to you about the defense and maybe some of the positives of it?
Like I said, as a whole, the defense kept them in this game. They forced a lot of third and longs, which was great. A couple of those fourth down stands that they made
Yeah.
too, pretty fantastic. Because it's hard to stop a team 4 plays in a row, especially when maybe the third down, you stop them for a loss or a 1 yard gain. Now it's 4th and 2, 4th and 3, things like that. It's hard to stop an NFL offense unless you're stopping the Bears, because then it's easy. But when you have Roquan Smith making great plays, we talked about Mac and Quinn already. Akeem Hicks cutting it out, and surprisingly enough, Duke Shelley also played relatively well. Definitely had some receptions on him, couple missed tackles here and there, but Duke Shelley had that one open field tackle on Demetric Felton.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic, and Demetric Felton, was one of my draft crushes. I've talked about that before. Super fast, dynamic, quick in those small spaces. So to be able to make a tackle like that is pretty impressive on his end too. But when you have that wear and tear, and that's really where you start to see the defense start to falter a little bit more when you have to be out there as long. I don't blame them for this loss. I'm not gonna, yes, Eddie Jackson missed that second tackle after Deion Bush did, but that's also, like, again, late in the game. It's If it was a closer game and you're getting more from your offense, I'd be more like, let's go all out, blame them for those. But at this point, I have a hard time doing that, because they were the reason they were in the game in the first place.
Absolutely. Look, Baker Mayfield, 19 of 31, 246 yards, missed some throws, but the Bears made it tough on him to, complete some of those passes. The tight ends weren't really as involved, other than, the touchdown reception to Austin Hooper late in that first half there. But I think for the most part, yes, this was on the road. The offense gave him no help whatsoever. There was no complimentary football, right? There really was. It was a defense that showed up for a good portion of this game, and then as it kind of expected it to, it trickled off. They gave up some bigger runs. Kareem Hunt was able to burst off some big runs, but the one, and I guess this is where we can lead to some of the negatives, as well as the Bears played defensively. And they were a pretty stout group in terms of pass rush, just being, contesting receivers and for the most part, make a tackle. I'm aware who's missed tackles in this game. But the one thing is, like, the Browns knew exactly when to call screens against them, and knew they caught them at the best time. It could just be play calling. It really can. That's what a good play caller does. It gets you and takes advantage of maybe, an aggressive defense that's coming up field. But it seemed like there was a bunch of times in this game where the screen pass to Kareem Hunt or whoever it may have been, and there were some big chunks down the field. So that's like the one area I was looking at in my notes, like, man, as well as they played, these screen plays are killing them. And why can't we have that in the Bears offense? Again, it doesn't make much sense. Yeah, Mason, anything else that you're thinking about with this Bears defense as a whole? Do you feel, after this game, do you feel better about the Bears defense? Do you think they're closer to what we saw against Cincinnati? Or, I mean, I guess, look, it's 26 points, but yeah, I guess, what is your feel for this Bears defense as now we head into week 4 against the Detroit Lions?
I feel better about this defense than I did definitely after week 1. I mean, obviously week 1 was rough. And that was where we were like, oh, okay, red alert, things are going to go terribly. But from what we saw against the Bengals, from what they did today, again, the defense can keep you in games. They're going to play well enough Are they 2018, top 3 unit? No, I wouldn't say that. But I mean, they're definitely a top half of the league. Depending on if they eventually get some help from the offense, I could think they could be a top 10 defense, just maybe not in terms of scoring, but at least in terms of yards. But that aggressiveness that they have to get after the quarterback also definitely, like you said, kind of burned them a little bit. When you have someone like Kareem Hunt with 6 receptions for 74 yards, that's tough. And those are all mainly, screen passes. They had a couple of those angle routes out of the middle. That's a Madden play, with that angle route. That shouldn't be as easy as it was. But if they can keep building on what they have, they should be fine. It's just I keep saying this, but they had zero help whatsoever.
Yeah, they had zero help, and they did play a very efficient and an offense that can score points, and they held them to 26. And I think the big thing is like they did that without creating any turnovers, and they didn't have any help from their offense. So I think for me, looking forward, this defense is, like you said, it will keep you in games. I think they're going to be a good unit by the end of the year, and they did this without Eddie Goldman. Who knows if that guy's ever going to play in a Bears uniform at this point? I know Bears fans are frustrated with both the Eddies on this team, Eddie Goldman and Eddie Jackson at this point, especially up to this point in the season. But yeah, I'm not too concerned, relatively what the whole unit's doing collectively as a group. They have to finish on making some of those tackles, obviously. And at this point, I think it is fair to question if Eddie Jackson will really ever get better at that, because he got exploited for it in week 1. It shouldn't be an issue 2 weeks later, right? It shouldn't be an issue where you miss. And I know your other safety missed too, but someone's got to take accountability. And those 2 plays kind of show you nobody did. So yeah, like you, I do feel good about this defense. We'll do a quick hit on special teams, and I think there are obviously some talking points there. But anything that stands out to you about this third phase of the Bears?
The two main things. One, I want a little bit more out of Khalil Herbert. I need because the Browns weren't getting a lot of touchbacks, right? He had chances for returns, and nothing particularly was great about him. And then, of course, the one that he had, where you're like near the end of the half, we're like, okay, well, maybe they can actually like try a deep ball or something like that. It got brought back due to an issue with, I believe it was holding, something of that nature. And then Simba Webster fumbled the ball. That could have been huge. I mean, obviously Bears still lost regardless, but if they hadn't recovered the ball, they were in Bears territory, probably would have punched it in for a score, and that would have just been a game changer much earlier on than what ultimately happened. So still, punt returning is still an option ever since Drake Cohen went down. So they got to figure that out. And apparently there are a couple people that were tweeting about how the fumbles were a problem for him when he was with the Rams even. And so hopefully that's something that doesn't continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think not having I don't know if the Bears feel this way, but someone that's reliant or reliable as that punt return, because anytime that ball goes on the ground, you're hoping that the ball bounces in your favor, which it did for Nasimba, but he was brought onto his team for that specific reason. You're not going to see Nasimba Webster playing any type of offense. It's going to be there as a punt return, and that's it. The only other thing, Mason, when Cairo Santos was called to kick field goals, he made his field goals. So, and I think that is it 30 or 31 straight, somewhere around that mark for Cairo Santos. So you have someone you can count on. Just need to get in that range. And obviously after this game, that proves to be a lot more difficult, easier said than done. All right, Mason, we'll go to the fourth quarter of our show and kind of accelerating the clock here, which makes sense after this 26-6 loss to the Browns. And we talked about this segment. It was during the Bengals game about calling an audible and what this segment what we could do with it. So I'm going to kind of hand it off to you first. What would you, looking back at this game, do differently? And obviously there's a lot, but what is like the big thing that kind of stands out?
If I was going to go back, and I think a lot of people would feel this way as well, it's just the entire game plan on offense just needs to be different, like the entirety of it. And while, yes, Justin Fields doesn't seem like a guy that gets rattled super easily, he doesn't seem like he's a guy that is going to be getting the yips and things of that nature. But there is still something to be said about trying to organically grow his confidence, right? And that just wasn't done from the beginning, right? The first couple plays, first series out, it was a lot of handoffs. It was very predictable, run pass, run pass. And then when you finally start to try to get the actual ball in the air a bit more, it's really funky routes. They're not easy completions. It's him having to try to fit it into very small windows or under duress, things of that nature. So for it going into, like, for example, next week, it would be lovely to see a bit more easy throws, things that can just get him on a rhythm, just boom, boom, boom. When they actually started going a little bit up tempo, that helped too. But they only did that a couple of times. And then lastly, running the ball more. To me, at least, when he's averaging, I think it was 3.4 yards per carry, 10 touches isn't really enough for David Montgomery. It just doesn't have to be on first down almost every single time. So maybe mix that up. But also doing that so we can actually get some play action going, right? A play action rollout is a beautiful thing. And the fact that that wasn't done enough is a problem for me.
Yeah, and I'll go really specific with how I'm going to treat this segment. Just again, calling an audible here. I would have liked to see, and again, you kind of alluded to this earlier, Mason, about do the Bears even have the right personnel, but really having those extra guys in to block the edges, and maybe that's with a JP Holtz or leaving in Montgomery to block. And there are even plays where the Bears did that and it still didn't work, but it just seemed like knowing how much pressure Garrett, Clowney, and the rest of the Browns front seven were getting, and especially off the edges. And even when they didn't register a sack, there just needed to be at some point where Matt Nagy made an adjustment to have those heavier sets in so that you could give Justin Fields more time to throw from the pocket, because that's what you were calling. You weren't really designing him to roll out, but if that's going to be the case, you need to give him time to do so. And obviously that wasn't the case. So going back, and if I could do things over, it's like that's what I would have incorporated more into this game plan, because clearly you have him drop back in the pocket and try to throw from there, knowing that the edges are collapsing, was not working. So that's something I would do.
He also, and I just realized this, Fields only ran the ball 3 times. Now, I'm not saying be Lamar Jackson, because we don't need that, but that's a little insane to me. Three attempts, 12 yards with a long of 7. There maybe a little more design quarterback runs.
It just didn't seem like that was even in like the game plan. Like that wasn't ever going to be a part of it for some reason, and I don't understand that. Matt Nagy was asked earlier in the week. It's like, I think it was from Mark Potash who asked a great question. He's like, is there an element of surprise that you could bring to Cleveland, because knowing that you have a guy that's as physically capable as a Justin Fields? And just even, again, I don't remember exactly what Matt Nagy said, but clearly there wasn't any creativity. There wasn't anything that catered to his strengths, and there was no element of surprise because the Browns looked like they knew exactly what the Bears were going to do and limited them to under 50 total yards, which is nuts. All right, Mason. We got that out of the way. Now we have to pick an MVP for this game, the most valuable Bear. And I know this seems, I don't know, counterintuitive because of what the game was like, but who's your MVP? Who stood out and why?
I think you're going to take someone that I would say, so I'm going to take something that's a little more not obvious. I'm going to say Pat O'Donnell, because he actually had some amazing punts. Like, they were like that big leg we've talked about for him, and he really did help flip the field. And then there was some pretty solid punt coverage as well. So the Bears were able to really get the Browns on their side, which was really important, because when you can't move the ball at all, that was huge. And just was able and let the Browns have to force the Browns to have to march down the field instead of taking over at the 50 at their own 40, something of that nature.
I like that one a lot there, Mason, and that's exactly what the Bears were doing in the first half. Like, they had to put together long drives, and the Bears stopped them on 4th down. So I really like that. I was gonna twist this, most valuable Brown. I was just gonna say Myles Garrett, duh. But okay, for a Bears, I will go with Robert Quinn. I think that's the guy who you're referring to, and that's weird. Going into the season, week 3, would have I anticipated saying that Robert Quinn was the most valuable Bear? Absolutely freaking not. But he's showing up, And that is great for this Bears defense and great for Khalil Mack, who ended with 2. I think how they finally put the tally mark, Quinn had 1.5 sacks and Mack had 2. So look at that. I mean, you're starting to get these edge rushers that you paid so much money. You have so much money allocated to that group, and they're playing dividends so far through 3 weeks. So I'll give it to Robert Quinn on that one. And now, Mason, we kind of close out the show with our 2-minute warning here. I don't have the ticker, and I'll kind of give you the floor, though, to just kind of, again, we've been doing this all like therapeutically, just kind of talking through this Bears game. But 2 minutes, you have the floor. I'll shut up.
So after this, I definitely got to spend some time watching some of the press conferences to see what's going on, Justin Fields' hand and everything like that. But we saw it kind of filter in. It looks like he should be okay. I mean, you never know. Obviously, 24 hours later, a lot of times things, swelling blows up and it's difficult to do, yada, yada, yada. But that's one of the biggest things here is because this year the Bears are not doing anything. They might make the playoffs. You never know. But is that really what you want? Not necessarily. You want to see development of your young quarterback. So you got to protect Justin Fields, but you got to let him play, and you got to let him build his confidence. You got to let him do the stuff that he wants to do. Now, I don't know how confident I am that this is the coaching staff to do that. I never like to be the person calling for people to get fired, and it's really early. This is week 3 to really be talking about that. It's a long season because, looking ahead, if 6-7 weeks go by and all of a sudden the Bears are a game over 500 or something, we're singing a different tune. But it is concerning for me because we have now seen multiple iterations of this Bears offense and give multiple quarterbacks. They go, okay, well, we don't have the running back, because it can't be Jordan Howard. So now it's David Montgomery. Well, I can't do anything with this quarterback. I need this one. Well, now just kidding. That wasn't a good one either. Let's do this one. Well, I don't have the offensive line. And so, they draft a bunch of people in the 6th and 7th round. Finally, this year, they draft someone earlier, and it turns out, all right, we got some injuries got to deal with. I don't have the wide receivers I need. I need speed. Where's Damiere Byrd? Again, we said that in some of these preview episodes. He hasn't been out there. Goodwin, you can't really look at a lot of the targets and receptions because there were 6 total, so not exactly a lot to go around. And there's one deep pass, and it wasn't a little underthrown, and it wasn't that great either. And obviously, he was under duress, and Mikey gave Justin, so it's not like he could even get a deep pass off. But you keep saying, like, I need these things, and then you give Matt Nagy and this coaching staff these things, and it hasn't happened. So, if there's the thing I'm the least confident in this entire team, it is the current makeup of people who are not on the field.
You hit on a lot of great stuff there, Mason. And I'll probably at some point in my rambling repeat some of the things, but here's where I'll take this. Do not make it come to a conclusion on Justin Fields after today. That should be obvious, but there will be people, oh, did you see what he finished with? 6 of 20 for 68 yards? Do not, because that is the worst thing you can do about this young man and what he's capable of doing, I think, with the right people around him. So that's number 1. Number 2, and again, this is his first start, and it's just the first time he actually got time with the starting offense, just actually repping throughout the week, trying to build that chemistry, trying to get things right. So as bad as this game looked offensively against the Browns, and it hit a new low, like I said, I think it's hard to be worse than it was today in next week's performance against the Lions at home. So I think it is natural that we're going to see an uptick in production, in productivity, in play calling. I really do believe that. But it goes back to, well, even if it does, when you face that good opponent again, is it just going to look similar to this? Because that's what seems to be the case with the Bears, is that they can take care of or contend with the teams they're supposed to beat. But, man, you go on the road against a playoff caliber team, you get whooped. That happened against the Rams. We're 3 weeks into the season and already twice against playoff caliber teams. They're just not in the same realm. And what does that go back to? I think it goes back to the coaching staff and what you're trying to do collectively as a team. And Mason, I think you hit on such a good point, is that, look, Matt Nagy, there really are no more excuses for this guy. We've seen him fail with Mitchell Trubisky, Nick Foles, and now you have Justin Fields. It's his first start, so I'm not going to get too worked up about it, but if this continues to be the case and your offense consistently doesn't have answers for what the defense is doing, you can't game plan during the game and adjust to what the defense is doing. And you have all these pieces around. You have the speed at the receiver position. Your offensive line still does need work, but you have a very capable running back. You should have tight ends that could do something. If it's still not working, it's on you. It's on you, Matt Nagy. So that's kind of where I will leave that with. Hopefully, the only good thing that I have, Mason, the Bears get to play Detroit. And I don't care how competitive they looked in a half against Green Bay, last week. It's still the Detroit Lions. So that maybe could be the saving grace for the Bears and how they can get back to 500 this season. But that's going to do it. We'll be looking forward to week 4 against those Detroit Lions, like I was talking about. We'll be meeting the opponent, a very familiar opponent, obviously, in just a couple of days. So just stay on the lookout for that. Make sure you're following Mason on Twitter, following myself on Twitter, follow the Bears, Chicago Audible on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those great things. We really appreciate you joining the live stream after a disappointing 26-6 loss. But until next time, bear down, Chicago.